Hi everyone, it's Alex Stevenson here from Ninja Teacher, and today I'm going to be giving you the latest news from Vietnam to do with the most recent outbreak that's happening here right now and what's happening in the different cities in Vietnam to do with restrictions and the number of cases, as well as talking to you about Vietnam's vaccination program, as well as updates on the latest news to do with visas and getting into Vietnam. So let's crack into it. So Vietnam has now hit 13,000 cases in total with 70 deaths, and actually the majority of these cases have been in this most recent wave that's happening now that started on the 27th of April, and since then there have been nearly 11,000 cases. So with a population of 97 million, Vietnam's cases are still extremely low compared to global standards, but let's talk about how each city in Vietnam is doing right now. So unfortunately the beaches in Da Nang as well as restaurants are now closed again. So we had a short little break of freedom since my last video. If you watched that, it's only been like a week and a bit, so not that much time of everything being open up again, but there was a recent outbreak. A few cases, I think around 20 cases happened here in Da Nang, and that's why we've gone back into a level of social distancing. So that's a bit unfortunate. So Da Nang closed restaurants and the beaches on June 20th, so that was a short-lived opening. So there are only 23 confirmed cases around then, and I don't think there have been many cases since then, so hopefully Da Nang has got this little outbreak under control and we'll get back to things reopening here in Da Nang. The vast majority of the cases were actually up in Bac Giang province, where about 5,500 of the cases in this latest wave were, and that's an industrial area up in the north of Vietnam, and a lot of the factories and places around there closed down during this recent outbreak. So the most worrying case right now seems to be Ho Chi Minh City, with over 2,000 cases in this recent wave. So they've stopped running taxis in the city, buses, and you aren't allowed to go outside and gather with more than 2 people outside of workplaces. So it's pretty strict social distancing happening there right now, and it's now in its 4th week of social distancing. So I've heard from the team in Ho Chi Minh City, Miranda, Chi and Claire are all in Ho Chi Minh City right now, and they say it's pretty bad at the moment. There are lots of people getting sent to quarantine, some buildings are being locked down, markets are closed, so it's quite intense there right now. The big issue is that Vietnam hasn't been able to trace all the sources of the cases, and if you know how Vietnam has done so well, it's basically because of contact tracing and isolating people that have been in contact with people who have the virus. So if they can't find out where the cluster started, where those cases came from, then it's very hard to trace, and that means the virus is definitely spreading a lot more than it has in previous times. On a more positive note, things are going very well in Hanoi. They've just reopened indoor dining as well as barbershops, and that is allowing people to actually go out again, and I think a lot of people are really happy after a month of restaurants being closed, being able to get out and about, to go out and eat, and that's a positive step in the right direction. There are some restrictions, like no more than 50% capacity allowed, no more than 20 people in total, and restaurants have to close by 9 p.m. Bars, karaoke and clubs are still not allowed to open, but if you know how things are in Vietnam, most people eat and drink at the same time, and most bars are also restaurants. So, and in total, Hanoi's had less than 500 cases in this most recent wave. So the capital city is doing very well right now. So it is very frustrating having these closures and reopenings, and it's affecting a lot of individuals and small businesses in Vietnam. But one thing to be grateful for is we've only had 14,000 cases, 70 deaths in a population of 70 million people. So there is that to be thankful for. Now let's talk a little bit about Vietnam's vaccine program and what they're intending to do with that and the latest news to do with it. So Vietnam's plan is to administer 150 million doses of the vaccine and have 70% of its population vaccinated by the end of the year. However, it's been slow going so far, with only 2.5 million people who have actually got a dose so far. Vietnam has mostly been buying and using the AstraZeneca vaccine, but they've also approved a number of other vaccines for use in Vietnam, including most recently the Pfizer vaccine, as well as the Russian and Chinese vaccines for use in Vietnam, but most of them have been AstraZeneca so far. The main issue seems to be that Vietnam has just not managed to get enough vaccines to really get started with its vaccination program. This is at least in part to do with the fact that because Vietnam has done so well so far, the COVAX program has not prioritized getting doses to Vietnam, and that means it's only been able to acquire a very small number of doses in the grand scheme of things. However, this recent wave really has made it clear now that it needs to be done, it needs to be stepped up, and Vietnam has been working on its own vaccine. There are currently 4 vaccines that are being worked on in Vietnam, and the most promising one, NanoCovax, is now in its 3rd stage of trials, and so far it looks very promising, and the 3rd stage of trials is actually supposed to be finished very soon, and if it is, then they can actually go ahead in August with producing and rolling out these vaccines. So hopefully that's going to happen and things are going to ramp up as soon as Vietnam can get its hands on enough doses, whether that's through its own program or through buying more from different sources. And I think they're working on this right now. They've actually launched a vaccine fund which has already got over $300 million donated from citizens as well as companies. And I think once Vietnam gets the doses it needs, it's going to be very effective at rolling out the vaccines. You can see in the way Vietnam does things that it's going to happen very quickly. The people trust the government. They will take the vaccines, I'm pretty sure. And I think that the actual rollout, as soon as we get hold of the vaccines, is going to be very effective. So I just bought a motorbike for 1.8 million dong, which is ridiculously cheap. It's a Yamaha Nova, pretty old, pretty shabby, but just the fact that I could get it for that cheap is crazy. It's a bit of a fixer-upper, I guess. A lot of people are leaving and just selling what they have, and I've been renting a motorbike recently, so I just thought I'd buy a cheap one. Let's talk about the latest to do with visas and moving to Vietnam. So if you saw my recent video, it actually got a lot of views, I think over 100,000 views. Obviously, a lot of people were interested in what was going on. But in that video, I explained that basically there were different groups of people affected by the recent visa crackdowns, and I'm not going to cover everything right now, but just to clarify that the people that are most affected are those that have been living in Vietnam long-term on tourist visas or were using the visa agent-sponsored business visas. They were using shell companies to sponsor these business visas. Those were the people that had to leave Vietnam for the most part. The people that weren't affected were those working legally in Vietnam who have work permits and TRCs. If you're living in Vietnam as an English teacher and you're paying your taxes, you're all good. So those aren't the people that are affected. There were some people that seemed to be having problems with transferring to a new school and getting a work permit, which seems to be a combination of just the fact that you can't do a visa run to come onto a new visa. You can't leave the country and come back in, and that's how it was done previously. And also the general crackdown seems to have affected some people's applications for new work permits. So just to clarify, those that are teaching English in Vietnam, have a work permit and a TRC, aren't affected by all these visa crackdowns right now. So what about moving to Vietnam right now? Well, unfortunately, with all these new cases and this recent wave, nothing has got any easier, and it is still prohibitively expensive and difficult to get into Vietnam with the 21-day quarantine at a hotel, which you have to pay for, and just the fact that most schools aren't willing or able to sponsor new teachers to get into the country. We've been keeping up with our network of schools here in Vietnam, and unfortunately, it's just not the case that many schools are getting people into the country. We used to bring in over 100 people per year into Vietnam. Right now, there's only a few people here and there that are actually managing to get into the country with the current process. For example, I was on the phone earlier with one of our alumni who actually came through Ninja Teacher to move to Vietnam a few years ago, and he's now actually a hiring manager at a school here. And he was telling me that they're trying to hire around 30 teachers for the new school year starting in September. and they are struggling to find enough teachers. So it's actually quite difficult for schools to get enough teachers now because of the shortage of teachers in Vietnam. But he said, you know, the teachers have to be in Vietnam. They're not able to get teachers into the country. So it does go to show that schools really need teachers right now. And as soon as the borders do open more and you can move to Vietnam, there are going to be a lot of good job opportunities here. And I've been looking at different countries that are alternatives to move to instead of Vietnam. But you know, Vietnam's such a good option in terms of the salary to living costs, the lower working hours. It is a really difficult country to beat in terms of the lifestyle and all of those factors when it comes to teaching in Vietnam. So I know a lot of people are just waiting until things get better. And I think that's going to happen as Vietnam ramps up its vaccination program. They're definitely going to wait until more of the population is vaccinated to let people back into the country more freely. So what I'd like to see is the quarantine period reduced to something like 5 or 7 days. That would be really good because I think more schools would be willing to help teachers out then, and obviously the process just to get a little bit easier in terms of sponsoring people to get into the country, because it's overly complicated right now and difficult for schools to help people move here. Schools are also worried that teachers will use them to get into the country and then leave for another job. That's why a lot of them aren't sponsoring new people to get into the country. So we just have to wait and see. Vietnam makes these changes quite quickly, so it could be any day that they will make an announcement that will make things better and easier to get into the country. But I'm expecting as the vaccination program ramps up, that's when we're going to see some changes to do with making it easier to get into the country. So now's a good time to get everything prepared to move abroad. If you haven't yet taken a TEFL certification, you can look into our online TEFL course, which you can complete from home. It's got video recorded training and it's got live sessions. You get trained by our trainer Claire, who's got a master's in education from Harvard University. And then hopefully as Vietnam moves in the right direction with vaccinations, keeping these current outbreaks under control, we will see things get a little bit easier to move to Vietnam. So I'm looking forward to that. And with that, I'm going to finish off this video. Give it a thumbs up if you found it useful. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And I will speak to you soon in a new video about life abroad and teaching English. Speak to you then. Peace.